The Ascension Gala turned out exactly how my sister Brianna dreamed it would be. A penthouse view of the Manhattan skyline, live jazz, a tower of crystal champagne glasses, and 200 people dressed to impress. She had curated every second of this night to celebrate her promotion to junior partner. She earned the applause. What she didn't earn was the right to use her speech to pity me. I stood near the service entrance, holding a glass of tap water, looking at the city lights. They saw a failure in a thrift store dress. They didn't know that the very floor they were dancing on was about to be mine. Before we get into the rest of the story, I have a question for you. Have you ever been the smartest person in the room, but treated like the dumbest, just because of who you're related to? Drop a yes in the comments if you know that feeling. Let's see how many of us are out there. My mother, Jessica, tapped her silver spoon against a crystal flute. The sound was sharp, piercing the low hum of conversation like a needle popping a balloon. The jazz band fell silent. 200 heads turned toward the small stage where she stood next to my sister, Brianna. They looked like a matched set of porcelain dolls, perfect, polished, and terrified of anything real. To Brianna, my mother began, her voice trembling with a rehearsed emotion. When your father and I look at you, we see stability. We see a young woman who understood that success isn't a lottery ticket. It's a path. Law school, the bar exam, and now, a junior partner at one of the most prestigious firms in Washington. Applause rippled through the room. Brianna beamed, clutching her glass like it was a scepter. I stood in the back, watching the performance. I knew what was coming. A toast in my family was never just a celebration of one person. It was always a comparison to another. We are so proud, my mother continued, her eyes scanning the room until they locked onto me. The warmth in her face vanished, replaced by a tight, pitying smile. And because we are celebrating success tonight, we also want to extend a hand to those who are still finding their way. The room went quiet. The air grew heavy. Bailey, she said, saying my name like it was a diagnosis. We know things haven't been easy for you. We know that little computer hobby of yours hasn't taken off the way you hoped. She didn't wait for a reaction. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a brochure. A glossy, trifold pamphlet. Your father and I have decided to pay for you to attend a coding boot camp, she announced to the room. It's a 6-week program. It will help you get certified so you can finally get a real job. Stop struggling, honey. Let us help you fix your life. A soft, awkward chuckle rippled through the crowd. My brother-in-law, Christopher, smirked into his scotch. I didn't move. I didn't throw my drink. I didn't scream that my little computer hobby was currently processing more data per second than the New York Stock Exchange. I just stood there. You might wonder why I didn't defend myself, why I didn't walk up there and tear that brochure in half, but you have to understand the trap of normalized cruelty. When you grow up in a house where you are the designated failure, your humiliation is the glue that holds the family together. If I fought back, I would be the crazy one. If I cried, I would be the emotional one. They had spent 20 years building a narrative where Brianna was the queen and I was the court jester. Any reaction I gave them would only validate their story. Silence was the only weapon they didn't know how to counter. It wasn't weakness, it was a shield. I had learned a long time ago that you cannot prove your worth to people who profit from your worthlessness. So I looked at my mother, across the sea of expensive tuxedos and pitying glances. I forced the corners of my mouth up into a small, tight smile. Thank you, Mother, I said, my voice steady enough to carry over the silence. I'll keep that in mind. She nodded, satisfied that she had been the benevolent savior, and turned back to the applause. She didn't see my hand slip into my pocket, she didn't see me unlock my phone, and she certainly didn't see me open the secure admin panel for Etheria. They wanted to fix my life. I decided it was time to show them exactly what I had built while they were busy looking down on me. The applause for Brianna seemed to go on forever. It washed over the room like a warm tide, soaking everyone in the glow of her achievement. I watched my father beam at her, his face flushed with the kind of pride that can't be faked. He looked at her and saw a return on investment. He looked at me and saw a sunken cost. I closed my eyes for a second, and the penthouse faded. The smell of expensive perfume and truffle oil vanished. Suddenly, I was back in the sub-basement of a data center in New Jersey. It was 3 years ago. The air conditioning was so loud it rattled my teeth. I was wearing 2 hoodies because the server room was kept at 60 degrees. And I couldn't afford a heater for the closet I was renting down the hall. While Brianna was taking prep courses for the bar exam, paid for with my father's platinum card, I was sleeping on a tangled pile of Ethernet cables. My dinner was a bag of pretzels from a vending machine. My social life was debugging quantum entanglement algorithms until my eyes bled. They called me a drifter. They told their friends I was finding myself. I wasn't finding myself, I was building the future. I remembered the meetings with venture capitalists who looked at my thrift store blazer and laughed me out of the room. They told me I didn't have the look of a CEO. They said Etheria was too ambitious, too complex, too theoretical. They wanted a photo-sharing app. I gave them a new architecture for reality. I didn't quit. I didn't call home for money. I went back to the basement. And I coded until the sun came up. I looked across the table at Christopher, Brianna's husband. He was an investment banker, the type of guy who thought he was a master of the universe because he moved money from one column to another. He was checking his phone under the table, probably monitoring the Asian markets. He had no idea. The trading platform he was using? It ran on Etheria's latency protocols. The security encryption protecting his firm's assets? My code. The predictive modeling that got him his bonus last year? My architecture. He wasn't a titan of industry, he was a user on my network. That was the difference between us. They played the game. I built the board. My mother's voice cut through my thoughts. We just want you to have what Brianna has, Bailey. Security. A future. The irony was so thick I could taste it like copper. They thought security was a salary and a 401k. They didn't understand that I had already secured enough capital to buy and sell their entire worldview 10 times over. I looked at the brochure for the coding bootcamp still sitting on the table. It was an insult, yes. But it was also a validation. It proved that they truly saw nothing. They looked at a lion and saw a stray cat. I felt a vibration against my hip. I didn't need to look at my watch to know what time it was. The Tokyo Stock Exchange had just closed. The embargo on the press release was lifting. The wire services were updating. The ghost in the server room was about to become very, very real. I took a sip of water. It was time to show them the difference between a salary and an empire. I checked my phone. 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The markets in Tokyo had just closed. The embargo was lifted. The phone felt cool in my hand. A small, black rectangle that held the power to rewrite reality. I didn't hesitate. I didn't look for approval. I opened my encrypted messaging app and typed a single word to my CTO. Execute. It took 3 seconds. 1. My mother was laughing at something Christopher said, her head thrown back in a performance of carefree joy. 2. Brianna was signaling the waiter for more champagne, her diamond ring catching the light. 3. The room changed. It started with a glitch. The massive, floor-to-ceiling digital screens that wrapped around the penthouse lounge screens that had been displaying a tasteful, looping video of the New York skyline suddenly froze. The jazz music didn't stop, but it sounded thin now, fragile against the sudden visual static. A murmur rippled through the crowd. People looked up, confused. Was it a technical malfunction? A part of the show? Then, the screens went black. Through the glass walls, down in Times Square, I saw the giant billboards mirror the darkness. The NASDAQ screen, the Reuters building, they all blinked out in unison, synced by the algorithm I had written. The darkness lasted for a heartbeat, just long enough to make 200 people hold their breath. Then, the red tickers appeared. They scrolled across every surface in the room, wrapping us in a band of urgent, glowing light. The breaking news alert, sound that sharp, 3-note chime, blasted through the speakers, cutting off the saxophone mid-note. Breaking news. Market alert. Quantum leap. My mother stopped laughing. Brianna lowered her glass. The center screen, the one directly behind the stage where my family stood, flared to life. It wasn't a loop of the skyline anymore. It was a live feed from CNBC. The anchor looked excited, practically shouting over the chyron. In a stunning announcement that has rocked the global tech sector, Stealth startup Aetheria has exited stealth mode with a confirmed valuation of $22 billion. The number hung in the air. 22 billion. Making its founder and sole CEO the richest self-made woman under 30 in history. The silent titan of Silicon Alley has finally shown her face. And there it was. My face. It was a studio portrait I had taken 6 months ago. In the photo, I wasn't wearing a thrift store dress. I was wearing a black turtleneck, looking directly into the camera, with eyes that held zero apology. The image was 10 feet tall. It towered over Brianna, making her look like a doll standing in the shadow of a monument. The headline underneath my face scrolled in bold white letters, Bailey, CEO of Aetheria. Net worth, $4.5 billion. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. You could hear the ice melting in the champagne buckets. I watched my father. I saw the blood drain from his face, leaving him gray and ashen. He looked from the screen to me, then back to the screen. His brain was trying to reconcile the two images. The daughter he pitied, standing by the service door in a cheap dress, and the titan on the screen who had just altered the global financial landscape. He couldn't do it. The cognitive dissonance was almost audible. Christopher, the investment banker, dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound exploding like a gunshot. He was staring at his phone, his thumb scrolling frantically. He was seeing the trades. He was seeing the volume. He was realizing that the system glitch he'd complained about all week was me testing the network. I didn't step forward. I didn't wave. I just took another sip of my water. The ghost wasn't invisible anymore. I was the only thing in the room that was real. The silence didn't last. It broke like a fever. First came the whispers, a low, frantic buzzing that started at the back of the room and swept forward. Then came the phones. 200 screens lit up simultaneously as guests fact-checked reality. They weren't looking at Brianna anymore. They weren't looking at the skyline. They were looking at me. I saw the shift happen in real time. The same people who had chuckled at my mother's coding bootcamp joke 5 minutes ago were now staring at me with a mixture of terror and hunger. I wasn't the charity case in the corner anymore. I was the sun. And they were suddenly realizing they might get burned. But I wasn't watching the guests. I was watching my mother. If you grew up in a normal family, you might expect this to be the moment of redemption. You might expect tears of joy, a hug, a "we knew you could do it." But I didn't grow up in a normal family. I grew up in a hierarchy. My mother didn't rush toward me with open arms. She marched toward me with clenched fists. Her face wasn't flushed with pride. It was twisted into a mask of absolute, unadulterated rage. "You selfish, manipulative little," she hissed, her voice shaking so hard the diamonds at her throat trembled. "You did this on purpose. You waited until tonight. You sat there and let me make that speech just so you could humiliate your sister." She didn't care about the $22 billion. She didn't care that her daughter had just made history. She only cared that I had stolen the spotlight. "How could you?" she screamed, loud enough for the investors at the next table to hear. "This was Brianna's night. You couldn't let her have one moment? You had to make it all about you." I stood perfectly still. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain the market timing, or the embargo. I just watched her unravel. There is a concept in psychology called a narcissistic injury. It explains what happens when a narcissist's false reality is challenged by the truth. You see, for 20 years, my family's identity relied on a specific ecosystem. Brianna was the golden child, the success, the winner. I was the scapegoat, the failure, the loser. My failure was the foundation their superiority was built on. They didn't just think I was a mess. They needed me to be a mess. My incompetence made them feel competent. My poverty made them feel rich. By succeeding, and not just succeeding, but eclipsing them entirely, I hadn't just made money. I had destroyed their world. I had proven that their entire narrative was a lie. They weren't crying because they were happy for me. They were screaming because they were grieving the death of their own superiority. Brianna pushed past Mom, her face streaked with tears and mascara. She pointed a shaking finger at the giant screen behind us, where my face was still looming over the party. "It's a lie!" she shrieked. turning to her guests, desperate to salvage the illusion. It's a scam! She can't code! She barely finished high school! It's crypto or fraud or something illegal. She looked at me, her eyes wide with panic. Tell them, Bailey, tell them it's fake. You're a receptionist. You fix routers. It was pathetic. It was horrifying. And it was clarifying. For years, I had wondered if maybe, deep down, they wanted me to win. If I just worked hard enough, if I just proved myself, they would finally love me. Now I knew the truth. They never wanted me to rise. They wanted me to stay on my knees so they would look taller. It's not fraud, Brianna, I said, my voice low and cool. It's quantum architecture. And if you check your husband's trading app, you'll see the market agrees with me. Christopher looked up from his phone, his face pale as a sheet. He looked at Brianna and shook his head slowly. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The numbers on his screen were screaming the truth. My father finally found his voice. He stepped forward, trying to leverage his physical presence, trying to be the patriarch one last time. You listen to me, he growled, grabbing my arm. I don't care how much money you think you have. You do not disrespect this family. You are going to fix this. You are going to apologize to your sister, and you are going to take that hateful picture down right now. I looked at his hand on my arm. Then I looked at his eyes. Take your hand off me, I said. I didn't yell it. I didn't have to. Or what? He sneered. You'll run away again? No, I said. Or I'll have you removed from the premises. He laughed, a bark of incredulity. Removed? I'm a platinum client with this venue. I know the owner. You can't remove me. I'm the one who pays the bills here. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Actually, I said, that's the other thing I needed to tell you. My father didn't wait for me to finish my sentence. He pulled out his phone, his fingers stabbing at the screen with the clumsy arrogance of a man who has never been told no by a service worker. Get Henri out here, he barked into the receiver. Now. I have a guest causing a disturbance. I want her escorted out by NYPD. He hung up and smirked at me. It was the same smirk he used to give when he denied my allowance because I hadn't smiled enough at his business dinners. Henri is a personal friend, Bailey. He knows who signs the checks in this town. You're about to learn a very public lesson in hierarchy. Brianna crossed her arms, sniffing back her tears, emboldened by Dad's confidence. You're going to be humiliated, she spat. You think a fake news article makes you someone? Henri will throw you out in the street where you belong. I didn't say a word. I just checked the time. 2 minutes later, the double doors burst open. Henri, the venue's general manager, a man who usually moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a Swiss watch, was sprinting. He looked terrified. My father straightened his tuxedo jacket. He stepped forward, hand extended, ready to receive his apology. Henri, thank God. This woman is harassing my family. I want her gone immediately, and I want her banned from the premises. Henri didn't even slow down. He walked right through my father. He didn't shake his hand. He didn't acknowledge his existence. He breezed past Brianna, past my mother, and came to a halt directly in front of me. He bowed his head, his hands clasped in front of him, trembling slightly. Miss CEO, Henri said, his voice breathless. I saw the alerts. I had no idea you were on site. My staff, we weren't prepared. Are these guests disturbing you? The silence that followed was heavier than the one after the breaking news. My father's hand was still extended in the air, grasping at nothing. Henri, my father croaked. What are you doing? I'm the client. I paid the deposit. Henri finally looked at him. The look wasn't friendly. It was the look you give a liability. Mr. Michael. Please lower your voice. You are speaking to the owner. Owner? Brianna shrieked. She doesn't own anything. She rents a basement. I took a step forward. The crowd parted for me like I was radioactive. Actually, Brianna, I said, my voice calm, leveled, and lethal. Etheria didn't just go public with a valuation today. We also closed on our physical assets last Tuesday. I gestured to the floor, to the glass walls, to the steel beams holding us 800 feet in the sky. We bought the building, I said. This penthouse? It's going to be the employee lounge. You aren't renting a venue from Henri. Henri leases this space from me. I looked at my father. He was swaying slightly, his face the color of old ash. You don't pay the bills here, Dad, I said softly. I collect the rent. The realization hit them like a physical blow. They weren't just standing in a room with a billionaire. They were trespassing on her property. The power dynamic didn't just shift. It evaporated. They were ants, arguing with a boot. You bought the building? My mother whispered, clutching her pearls as if they could strangle the truth out of the air. But the gala, Brianna's promotion, is over, I said. I turned to Henri, closed the tab, cut the music, security to the floor. Bailey! Brianna screamed, lunging forward before Christopher grabbed her waist to hold her back. You can't do this. This is my night. I paid for this. And I'm refunding you, I said, sounding bored. I don't want your money. I don't want your business. And I certainly don't want you in my employee lounge. I looked at the 200 guests, the partners at Brianna's firm, the investors Dad tried to impress. They were all watching, eyes wide, drinks forgotten. Everyone has 15 minutes to clear the floor, I announced, my voice carrying to the back of the room without a microphone. After that, my security team will consider you trespassers. And unlike my father, they don't care about your last name. You're evicting us? My father shouted, his voice cracking. We are your family. No, I said, turning my back on them. You're tenants, and your lease just expired. I didn't run. I walked. Behind me, the chaos was erupting. My father was screaming at Henri, threatening lawsuits, threatening bad reviews, threatening to call the mayor. Brianna was sobbing into Christopher's shoulder, her perfect night dissolving into a puddle of mascara and spilled champagne. My mother was just standing there, staring at the empty space where I used to be, her mouth opening and closing like she had forgotten how to breathe. I walked past the velvet ropes. I walked past the security guards, who nodded at me with a new respect. I stepped into the private elevator, the one reserved for the owner, and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors slid shut, I caught one last glimpse of my family reflected in the glass. They looked small, warped, distorted by the distance between us. It was strange. I expected to feel heavy. I expected guilt to crush me, the way it always did when I dared to step out of line. But there was no weight. I felt light. I felt like gravity had finally let go of my ankles. The elevator descended smoothly, a silent silver bullet dropping me back to earth. I thought about the empty seat at their table. For years, I had been terrified of being excluded. I had been terrified of that empty chair, of the hole it would leave in my life. But now, looking at the numbers climbing down on the elevator panel, I realized something. That empty seat wasn't a loss for me. It was a consequence for them. It was a permanent reminder of the daughter they chose not to see. Every time they looked at it, they would have to remember the night they lost their power. They would have to remember that access to me was a privilege, not a right, and they had revoked their own membership. The doors opened onto the lobby. My driver was waiting. Where to, Miss Bailey? He asked, opening the door of the black sedan. The office, I said. I have work to do. I settled into the leather seat and pulled out my phone. I had 17 missed calls from my mother. 12 from my father. A text from Brianna that just said please. I didn't block them. Not yet. I wanted them to see the read receipt. I wanted them to know I saw their desperation. And I chose silence. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my real office. Not a closet, not a basement. A corner suite on the top floor of the new Etheria headquarters, looking out over a city that glittered like a circuit board. My team was there. My developers, my engineers, the people who had slept on the floor next to me when we had nothing but code and caffeine. They were popping cheap champagne in paper cups, cheering, laughing, celebrating the $22 billion valuation. This was my family. The one I built, the one I chose. My assistant, a sharp young guy named Leo, poked his head in. Bailey? Security says your mother is in the lobby. She's demanding to see you. She says it's a family emergency. I looked at him. I looked at the view. I looked at the empire I had built from the scraps of my own ambition. Tell her she needs an appointment, I said, my voice calm and final. And Leo? Yes? Tell her the next available slot is in 2050. I hung up the phone and turned back to my team. Bailey walked away and never looked back. But I want to know about you. Is there a table you need to walk away from? A phone call you need to stop answering? Tell me your story in the comments. And if you believe that success is the best revenge, like this video and subscribe. We're building our own empire here.